The most common question we get and biggest concern that people have when thinking about making a move to Hawaii or just being able to stay in Hawaii and live here is the cost of living. So I got a breakdown for you of the top 9 expenses that we have in life and what they look like in Hawaii compared to the mainland. And of course, these are all on average. They vary greatly kind of on what island you live on and which area of the island and what your lifestyle is. But this is a pretty good breakdown of all of the things that you can expect from a cost of living standpoint if you're thinking about moving to Hawaii or figuring out what your expenses are going to look like and what kind of job you got to have to support the kind of lifestyle that you want to enjoy. So bringing in the data here, the first thing, of course, and the biggest expense anybody's going to have is your housing costs. And so the median home price in Hawaii statewide is just under $1 million. Again, this varies from island to island and community to community, but in general, you're going to pay a much higher cost for a home than you will in many, many places in the United States. And then rent for a 1-bedroom apartment is about $2,200 a month, and that's just in Honolulu's urban core. And a 2-bedroom apartment is around $1,848. So pretty expensive for a home. Just regular apartments are expensive. If you're looking at a single family home, upwards of $4,000 a month in most populated areas around the state. So obviously housing costs are going to be one of your highest costs going forward, but it's something to always expect if you're going to be moving to Hawaii or living here. And then utilities on average are much higher than they are in the mainland. And this is a very conservative estimate. I can tell you $221 for a electric bill is probably on the low end. I know many people with $300 and $400 electric bills, and that is compared to the national average of $135. So considerably higher, sometimes more than double in Hawaii versus other places. Water and sewer rates vary by county. So in Honolulu County, the combined water and sewer bill averages around $150 a month. Again, you can live in other rural places like on the Big Island where you have to live on catchment water, where you don't have municipal water and you privately maintain your water system, and the cost for that can vary also. And then internet, pretty standard. And I think this is around standard for the national average is about $67, $70 a month for pretty solid high-speed internet. So that's as to be expected and pretty common everywhere else. Groceries and food. This is something absolutely that is more expensive here than in most places because of the cost to ship it here. But on average, residents spend about $333 a week on food compared to the national average of $270. So considerably more here than in the mainland. And dining out on average, you can spend about $145 here compared to the national average of $109. I can tell you with a family of 4, very rarely do we only spend $145 going out to eat. If that's probably one meal, one cheap meal, and definitely if you do it multiple times a week, that number goes up exponentially. So going out to eat is absolutely expensive here. Transportation. So gasoline on average, and this fluctuates with what's going on in the economy. We see gas go down to around $4 a gallon. It gets above $5. This also varies depending on the island and what area you're buying gas in, but the national average is $3.46 right now. That goes up and down also, but in general, we normally see gasoline about $1 more here than we see in the national average, so it's always higher. And then public transportation is pretty reasonable. We got $3 and $2 bus rides depending on the island that you're on. So public transportation here isn't great. It is accessible, but it's not as regular as you'll see in many big cities. So a lot of times it's not as practical to use as in other places, but it is pretty cheap to use public transportation here. If you're looking to relocate here on the Big Island, I want to share with you a resource that we put together. Over 80 agents from my team, expert agents here on the Big Island, put together a relocation guide that will help you evaluate all of the important factors that you want to take into account before you move here to the Big Island. School districts, healthcare, employment, all of the things that you got to think about, we put into one home buyer's guide that will help you figure out what is best when you start this relocation process here to the Big Island. So if you want this guide, just click on the link below, fill out the form. We will send you the guide for free. And if you want to take the next steps and have a conversation with us, we'd be happy to help. Healthcare. All right, healthcare premiums are absolutely expensive here. Employers usually pay about $967, and the employers cover the remaining $6,400 in terms of their yearly costs. And again, this will vary based on your plan and your family. And if you're using Kaiser or HMSA, there's several different large insurance companies here. And then medical costs also can be higher here due to just that varies dramatically depending on what kind of care you need. But because of our remote location, it is definitely higher and sometimes limited. And sometimes if you need really specialized care, you need to go to the mainland. So that's always something to consider. But in most cases, most things that you need medical wise are here in the islands and definitely on Oahu if you need some type of care that the neighbor islands don't have. And then taxes. Taxes are definitely a big one. We have a general excise tax here, which is 4% statewide. That's usually marked up to 4.5 or 4.7 when you actually pay it at a business. This is applied to all goods and services in the economy. So people think it's a sales tax, but it's really not. It's charged at every single point of sale. I have a separate video that explains this in detail, but it generates the majority revenue that the state uses to fund all of our state services. So the general excise tax is applied to every good and service in food, medicine, really anything that you buy, you're going to pay that general excise tax on. And then we do have a state income tax, which is something that many states do not have. That ranges from 1.4% to 11%, depending on your income bracket. So that can be a significant cost at the end of the year. If you are in a higher income bracket, the state taxes are significant. And then property taxes is one thing that a lot of people feel like is lower in Hawaii. Effectively, the average is about 0.32% of the value of a home, but that also is not necessarily accurate because we charge so much in other taxes that property taxes can be low, where in other states they don't have an income tax and they don't have an excise tax like we do. And so their property taxes are higher to fund things like schools. So it's all comparable. A lot of times governments need money to run, and so they collect taxes in a bunch of different ways. But we do have, in effect, lower property taxes here than we see in most places. And then number 7, lifestyle and entertainment. Again, these are standard things, right, that a lot of people will have in their budget. A gym membership, it's pretty standard, 75 to 100 bucks a month, depending on what gym you go to. Outdoor activities is probably the biggest benefit to being in Hawaii. Is many of them are free, right? You can go to the beach, you can go hiking, you can do things like that for a relatively low cost, or maybe an upfront investment in a surfboard or something like that, or a bike or whatever you're into, and you don't have to pay after you make that upfront investment in equipment. So that's definitely a benefit of being here. We have lots of things to do that do not have any significant cost attached to them, and that's something that you definitely don't want to take for granted if you live here. And then movie tickets, around 15 to 20 bucks. Movies are getting expensive, and of course that's before you buy popcorn and soda and all the rest of the stuff. So night at the movies, I know, definitely can cost 100 bucks plus if you have a date or some kids. So it can get expensive to go out to the movies. And then education and childcare. So public school obviously has no tuition. Sometimes we have to help pay for supplies and lunches and things like that, but the costs are pretty minimal. Private school options here range from $8,000 to $25,000 plus annually. We have some really expensive, some of the best private schools in the nation, but they are very, very expensive, similar to like a college education. So that's something to consider in your budget if you want to send kids to private school versus public school. And then childcare is very expensive too, easily between $1,000 and $1,500 a month for either preschool or full-time daycare. So that is a significant cost that you definitely want to take into account. And then finally, just miscellaneous items, right? Pet care can be expensive when it comes to seeing the vet. Household goods, really furniture and things like that can be 30% higher here than in the mainland due to shipping costs, and that's always something to take into account. And then subscriptions, the great thing about the internet is everything on the internet pretty much costs the same wherever you are, so it's not going to be that much higher. Think about what kind of subscriptions you need, and they're going to be similar to wherever you're coming from. And so finally, just a summary of monthly expenses in Hawaii. A single adult can easily spend $2,500 plus a month in just living expenses, and that's excluding rent. And then a family of 4 can easily spend $8,000 a month excluding rent. So this is before you add in the cost of a home or an apartment. So pretty expensive in terms of monthly expenses. And if you're thinking about, hey, what does my income have to look like, right, to live here comfortably? For a single adult, you need to be making between $70,000 and $100,000 to live here comfortably. And for a family of 4, it needs to be $120,000 to $200,000 a year to live here comfortably. So to give you an idea of what kind of career and income you have to have, this gives you kind of a quick summary. It's very easy to make $100,000 a year in Hawaii and live very much paycheck to paycheck, and it's very, very middle class. So it's something to definitely keep in mind when you're planning long-term income and what your spending is going to look like. So if you have any questions about this or anything else, you can always reach out to me, Dylan at buybigisland.com, or there's always a link in the description below to book a meeting. I'd be happy to have a discussion about this or anything related to living in Hawaii that you have. And of course, if you have any real estate questions, that's what we specialize in. We'd love to help you get here and make a smart decision. As always, appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Aloha.